Good morning, everybody. It's so good to see you this morning. I know that this video is supposed to only be going live at 9 o'clock this morning, but we're away at the moment, and with internet connections and various things happening, it's just proving quite difficult to get everything recorded and uploaded and done at 9 in the morning. And so I actually decided that I would attempt my very first live video without telling anybody so that I could just go live, record the video, and then have it up hopefully on all the different platforms by 9 in the morning. So just excuse the lighting and potentially the sound, but recording in a hotel room early in the morning is not always the easiest thing, and I can hear various sort of bumps and movements all around the place. So yes, I was supposed to be appearing at 9 o'clock, but I'm appearing at 7. I think it's around about 7 o'clock, and it is the very first time that I've ever gone live before, so excuse me if I'm a little bit nervous. But my word for this morning is actually a word that I've titled South Africa Rise Up. And the reason for that is because we all know tomorrow is Heritage Day. It is the 24th of September, which is our Heritage Day, or as we often like to call it, National Braai Day. And it used to be Shaka Day. Yeah, it was Shaka Day. I think it was called before Shaka Day, and now it's Heritage Day. And over the last few years, over the last sort of 3 years, God has really been speaking to me a lot about South Africa and about Africa in particular, but specifically this year over South Africa. And I just felt that in light of Heritage Day, which is coming up tomorrow, I wanted to just release a word. The things that I feel that God has really been laying on my heart for South Africa over this time. And so Heritage Day is a time when we are supposed to remember our heritage and the history of our nation and all of those things. And I think that many of us, the history of our nation is not something that we particularly like to dwell on. It's something that we find quite shameful. It's something that for many of us, it makes us angry, it makes us ashamed. There's so many emotions that the history of our nation brings out in us. However, our nation is a nation unto God. It is a nation that is so in God's heart and on God's heart. And it is a nation that is so loved by God. And we have a place in the destiny of nations. And I think that sometimes we feel that because we're this tiny little nation stuck at the end of Africa, that we don't have a place in the ultimate destiny of nations, but we really do. We play a big role. We are going to play a big role in things to come. Now, I'm just trying to think of where to start from. So I think what I want to start with is this, because Arise is aimed mainly at, it's a platform for women, and it is aimed mainly at an audience of women, and most of my audience are female. I do have, I think the last time I had a look, about 30% of my audience are male, and that's awesome. I'm very excited about that. But because most of my audience are female, I'm going to start with the female part. And last month was our Women's Month. And as we all know, the 9th of August is Women's Day. And the 9th of August we celebrate Women's Day on the 9th of August because it is the day when women got together and they protested the past laws. So for those of us who weren't alive during those times, it was a very shameful time in our history where certain sections of our population had to have a special pass to be able to be out on the streets, and they had curfews and things like that they had to abide by, and it made it very difficult for them to work. It made it difficult for them to earn a living, and it was actually just a very unjust and unfair situation. And women, a group of women, got together and decided to protest these past laws. And these women were actually, in the days where there was no social media, it was just a group of 5 women. It was a black woman, it was 3 black women, a white woman, and a colored woman. 5 women altogether, 3 black women, a white woman, and a colored woman, who got together, and they managed to get 20,000 women to march against the past laws. No social media, no internet, no Facebook, no Insta, no none of those things to get people together. 20,000 women marched against the past laws. 5 women started that. So on Women's Day last month, I was invited to speak at a Women's Day event in Khayelitsha. And it was the most incredible privilege to be invited to speak at this Women's Day event. And the message that God gave me to speak there was about the daughters of Zelophehad. Now, I have done a teaching on the daughters of Zelophehad before. So if you go back on my Arise channel, you can have a look and see that you have a look at my teaching on the daughters of Zelophehad before. But the daughters of Zelophehad are mentioned in Numbers chapter 27. So I was invited to be a speaker at this Women's Day event in Khayelitsha. And as I stood in front of this audience of women at this Women's Day event, I was one of 3 speakers, and I realized that there was a black speaker, there was a colored speaker, and there was me. And the 3 of us stood in front of this audience of mainly black women, only black women, actually, if I come to think of it, a black woman, a white woman, and a colored woman. And we stood there on Women's Day, and we addressed this Women's Day event. And I spoke on the daughters of Zelophehad, the 5 daughters of Zelophehad. And the story of the daughters of Zelophehad, if you can go and have a read of it in Numbers 27. But the basis of the story was that in those days in Israel, in the days of Moses, when a man died, his property was passed down to his sons. So this gentleman, Zelophehad, had 5 daughters. He had no sons. And when he died, his property was left, and he had no sons to pass his property down to. And basically, if as a woman in Israel in those days, and unfortunately it reverted back to that again later on, but in those days, women had no rights. And so if you were not married and you had no father or no husband or no brother to look after you, you had nothing. You had no right to anything. You had nothing. And these 5 daughters of Zelophehad were not content to just leave the status quo be. They stood up and they went before Moses. They stood before Moses, Eleazar, the priest, and the leaders, and all the congregation at the door of the tent of meeting. Now, I just want you to understand that for a second. These 5 daughters of Zelophehad stood together before Moses, who was known to be the one who heard from God, the leader of the Israelites, Eleazar the priest, the leaders, all the congregation, which would have been men, mainly then. And they said, "Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among those who assembled together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died for his own sin, as did all those who rebelled at Kadesh, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be removed from his family because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brethren." So what they were saying is, why should we not inherit anything? Because our father died in the wilderness. We are now left homeless, penniless, landless, because we are only daughters. Why should we not inherit? Can we not inherit from our father's land? And Moses brought their case before the Lord, as he always did. And the Lord said, listen to what the Lord said. The daughters of Zelophehad are justified and speak correctly. The daughters of Zelophehad are justified and speak correctly. You shall surely give them an inheritance among their father's brethren, and you shall cause their father's inheritance to pass to them. And then God goes one step further, and he says, and say to the Israelites, if a man dies and has no son, you shall cause his inheritance to pass to his daughter. So what God says to the daughters of Zelophehad, he doesn't say, oh, you have no space to speak here. You don't belong here. He says you are justified and speak correctly. And not only do you, the daughters of Zelophehad, get an inheritance from this, but you also will now be responsible for actually changing the laws of Israel. And from now on, the daughters will receive the inheritance if there are no sons. I preached on that at this Women's Day event, which was on the Saturday. So our Women's Day is on the 9th of August. This Women's Day event was on Saturday, the 7th of August. I preached on that on Saturday, the 7th of August, and I stood before all of these women at this Women's Day event in Khayelitsha with my very good friend Sipakazi and my incredible friend Colleen, and I spoke about women and their inheritance, and that there is an inheritance in South Africa for women. Be you black, be you colored, be you white, no matter what you are, there is an inheritance, a physical inheritance, a spiritual inheritance. There is an inheritance for us in this nation that is ours. And it is being stolen from us and robbed from us and taken from us because, as we all know, South Africa has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence of any nation in the world. And we have all the women's months, we have all the women's days, we have all the things, but nothing much seems to change. Now, on Monday, the 9th of August, which was the actual Women's Day, at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 a.m., 1300 hours in the morning, there was what they call a sky quake. There was a sonic boom that sounded in the heavenlies in the early hours of the morning on Women's Day in South Africa. This sonic boom is known as a sky quake because there is no logical explanation for it. This noise was heard over most parts of the Western Cape. You can Google it. It's on Google. It's on the sites that you can find on Google. Some scientists believe that it is caused by a meteor breaking apart. Other scientists believe different things, but they call it a skyquake because at the end of the day, there is no definitive explanation for this sonic boom that occurs. And there are many, many, many people who heard it all around George, all around the Western Cape, at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 9th of August on Women's Day. There was a skyquake, a sonic boom. Now, I will take this one step further. The 9th of August was also the first day of Elul. The first day of Elul on the Hebrew calendar. And Elul is the month, which is the acronym for the phrase in Hebrew, obviously, but in English, the phrase, I am my beloved and he is mine. On the 1st of Elul, which just happened to coincide with the 9th of August, our Women's Day this year, at 1 in the morning, there was a sonic boom out of heaven where God said, these women are my beloved and I am theirs. And he drew a line in the sand for the women of South Africa, for the women of Africa. And it is time for the women of South Africa and the women of Africa to stand together, black, white, colored, no matter what, to stand together, to stand for our inheritance, to stand up for our nation, because peace, prosperity, all of the things that are destined for South Africa and for Africa are going to come from the women standing together, just as they did all of those years ago when they protested the pass laws, it is going to be the women that are going to take this country forward. It is going to be the women that are going to take this continent forward. It is South Africa's time, ladies. It is Africa's time, ladies. It is Africa's time. I've been saying this for 3 years now. We have spent far too long as the orphan child, where Africa as a continent has been the continent, and hear me when I say this, I'm talking about continents now, not nations, where Africa as a continent has always been the disregarded continent, the orphan continent, the Cinderella continent, you know, the continent that has always been the needy one, the one with its begging bowl out, the one that always needs, you know, its big brothers and sisters to step in and help it out. God is changing that. Watch. Wait, see what happens. The days are coming when Africa is going to hold the keys to the storehouse, and the continents and the nations of around the rest of the world are going to be the ones coming to us. We are going to be like the Joseph. The continent of Africa is going to be like the Joseph of the continents. And they are going to be coming to us. And we will have the keys to the storehouse. And we will have the ability to help other nations out when they are in dire straits. Don't look at the natural now. You can look at where we are right now and think that will never happen. Can a nation be born in a day? Absolutely. God said it can. In 2019, when we were praying for the elections, just before the elections in 2019 when we were praying, God gave me this vision of the continent of Africa as a ship. And South Africa was the rudder. So the continent of Africa was the ship, and South Africa at the end of the continent was the rudder. Now, I don't know a lot about ships, but I do know that a ship goes nowhere without the rudder. That the rudder steers the ship. And God said to me then, the destiny of Africa rests in the direction that South Africa takes. And that is not to say that the other African nations are not important. That is not to say that the other African nations are not as important as South Africa. Every part on a ship plays a part. There are many parts on a ship that a ship cannot move without. But the rudder steers the ship. The rudder moves and the ship moves accordingly. And South Africa is the rudder that is going to steer Africa. So we need to step into our God-ordained destiny as a nation in order for Africa to step into her God-ordained destiny as a nation. That is our responsibility. It is our charge. And in order for that to happen, women all over South Africa have to stand together, united. Believers all over South Africa have to stand together. Churches all over South Africa have to stand together. Believers, whether you're in a church or out of a church, it doesn't matter. Stand together so that South Africa can propel Africa forward the way that it needs to be propelled forward. Another vision that God gave me that same time that we were praying for the elections in 2019 was He showed me this vision of these angels, and they were draping a rainbow-colored flag over Table Mountain. God's rainbow-colored flag over Table Mountain. And at the same time, He said to me, Sally, South Africa is a melting pot of nations. And isn't that true? Isn't South Africa, as small as it is, as small as our nation may be, it is a nation that is a melting pot of how many different nations? Even if you just look at the genealogy of the people who are born and bred in South Africa, we all come from different nations. We stem from different nations. I mean, I was born and bred here. My parents were born and bred here, but my grandparents weren't. You know, we've all come from different places. South Africa is a melting pot for different nations. It is a microcosm of the world. If we can make it work in South Africa, there is hope for every other nation under the sun. And if we look to Jesus and let him be our focus, there is hope for every other nation under the sun. But it's going to start with the women. It is going to start with the women, and it is going to move from there in the same way that it started with the women all those years ago. God is going to shake the government. I'm not going to name names in this prophetic word. I'm not going to specify anything. I don't want to offend anybody or anything like that. But what I'm going to say is I'm going to say that the current government will not survive. God has shown me very clearly in a dream that the current government will not survive. In fact, the 2024 elections will prove to be their death knell. They will not survive. The current opposition will not be victorious. That is not going to happen either. There is going to be a brand new resistance, a brand new party, a brand new movement. A brand new movement that is going to come out of nowhere. It is going to be unexpected. It is going to come out of nowhere, and it is going to be a true reflection of a bringing together of colors and creeds. It is going to be a true reflection of what South Africa is supposed to represent in terms of a rainbow nation. It is going to be a true reflection. That does not mean to say that it is going to be easy. The current government is not going to leave easily. We need to watch out for laws that they try to slip past us without us being aware. We need to be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. It is not going to be an easy time. It is going to be a shaking. The current government, the current ruling party will not leave easily. There will be a shaking. It will be disturbing. It will be uncomfortable for everybody. It's not going to be easy. There will be a possibility, not a possibility. It might seem as if the more violent factions in our country are going to be victorious. They will not be victorious. In fact, God showed me very clearly many years ago that the Economic Freedom Front, he showed me the name changing to the Evangelical Freedom Front. So we need to pray for those people. We need to pray that the Economic Freedom Front become the Evangelical Freedom Front, because they are going to be a powerhouse for Jesus. They are going to turn around completely and be a powerhouse for Jesus. We need to pray that into being, church. We need to be praying for those people. So it is not going to be easy. It is not going to be without its issues and its problems and its disruptions, but it is going to happen. The status quo is not going to be maintained. It is not going to be maintained. God also showed me that there will be, over the next 10 years, there will be a reverse brain drain. In other words, a lot of the people who have left because of political instability, a lot of people who have left because of a spirit of fear, a lot of people who have left because they have felt or thought that South Africa is going to become another Zimbabwe, will be returning. Over the next 10 years, we are going to see more people returning to South Africa than leaving. And God has told me very conclusively that South Africa will not be another Zimbabwe. In fact, he told me Zimbabwe is not going to be another Zimbabwe. There is hope for Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe is going to turn around within the next 10 years. Within the next 10 years, we are going to see Zimbabwe rise from the ashes in ways that we have never, ever even expected. There is hope for Zimbabwe, huge hope for Zimbabwe. Do not write them off. South Africa is not going to be another Zimbabwe. Over the next 10 years, we are going to see a reverse brain drain. The people who are going to leave South Africa over the next 10 years are going to be people who are going to be headhunted by other nations, where it is going to be that space where other nations are going to be saying to South Africa, we need what you have. We need what you have. What is it that you have? We need it. Please come to us. Bring your skills. Bring what you have. We need it here. We are lacking and you have what we need. God showed me that South Africa is going to be a few steps behind Israel in terms of innovation. Where Israel is in innovation and in technology and in all of those things, South Africa is going to be a few steps behind Israel in terms of innovation. There is going to be so much innovation technologically and in so many other ways that is going to come out of South Africa that nations are going to be knocking on our door and asking us, begging us for what we have. This is all going to happen over and within the next decade in this nation. We need to remain proudly African. We cannot sell our land, our nation, our nations off to any other nations. We are not for sale. South Africa, we are not for sale. Africa, we are not for sale. We cannot sell ourselves off to the highest bidder. We need to remain proudly African. We need to remain proudly South African. God has showed me that institutions, ministries, churches that are rooted in African soil are going to explode. They are going to grow and explode. Things that are rooted in African soil. It is time for the sounds of Africa to be heard. It is time for the sounds of South Africa to be heard. It is time for the voices of Africa to arise. It is time for the voices of South Africa to arise. It is time for us to be proud of who we are in God. It is time for us to be proud of how far we've come and yet to be cognizant of how far we still have to go. Understand something. I'm not saying that this is all going to be a walk in the park, because it is not. We are fighting a low-grade civil war right now in this country against crime, against corruption, against kind of a low-level anarchy, against drugs, against human trafficking, against gender-based violence. We are fighting a low-grade civil war in this country, but God loves South Africa, and we will prevail. Do you know why? Because we have Jesus, and also because we are resilient. We are resilient, and we don't give up. We don't give up on each other, and we don't give up on our nation. We are proudly South African. We are proudly African, and we are going to see over this next decade, Africa rise up in a way that it has never risen up before. The economy is going to shake. This is a Shemitah year. There is going to be financial shaking. We are going to be impacted by that. We have to be careful. We have to be cautious. We have to be wise as serpents. We have to be gentle as doves. We have to have our ear so close to the mouth of the Father that we hear every word that issues forth from his mouth. We have to follow Holy Spirit every step. We have to be right behind him every step of the way, so that we know exactly what is happening and where we are supposed to go. But every believer in South Africa is called to rise up and step into what God has called them to. Because if they do, we can get through this. We can get through the shaking. We can get through the disruptions. We can get through the governmental shaking that is coming. We can be behind the new government that will come in. We can be behind everything that's going to come out, everything that will be exposed, everything that will be the light of truth is going to be shown on so much stuff. And it is going to be ugly, and it is going to be nasty, but it is going to be necessary. And then we are going to see Africa rise from the ashes. Like Joseph. Like Joseph. We are going to see an Africa that has been in the pit, that has been in the prison, and that can finally take its place in the palace, because God has a destiny for Africa. And God has a destiny for South Africa. Ladies, it's our time. It's our time to rise up. So I bless you with that. I bless you with that. I ask you humbly to share this word. To share this word with people. To let them know that there is hope. No matter how difficult it is. No matter how hard it might be. There is hope because there is Jesus. And we are South Africans. And we don't give up. Share this word, please. Please, I ask that humbly in all humility, because it is from God. And let us stand together. Let us stand together and be who God has called South Africa to be. Let us be who God has called Africa to be. Let us be proudly African. Have an amazing Heritage Day tomorrow. Have an incredible long weekend. I love you all. Thank you for watching. Now that I've conquered my fear of my first live, maybe I'll do it again. Love you all. Bless you. Mwah. See you again soon. Goodbye.